Hello and welcome to NJBIZ Conversations. I'm your host, Jeff Kanij. My guest today is Tahina Perez. She is the Executive Director of Teach for America, New Jersey. Tahina, welcome.
Hi, Jeff. Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thanks for joining me. I should also note that Tahina was also an honoree on our Education Power 50 list, number 2 in the top 10, so congratulations for that.
Thanks so much for the honor. It meant so much.
Good, I'm glad to hear it. You well deserved. Um, but we're talking today about the education New Jersey, teaching in New Jersey, since that's what you do. We're about a month into the school year. So I want to hear a little bit about how it's going as far as you're concerned. But first, I want to hear about the organization. I think most of my viewers have heard of Teach for America. It's a very prominent organization, very well known. But I'd like to hear from you about what you do. Your mission is to find, develop, and support equity-oriented leaders to transform education and expand opportunity for all children. Very, very high-minded. What does that mean in practical terms? What is your day-to-day like? What do you do?
Jeff, we should bring you on staff. That was perfect. You got the mission right on. It is exactly what you said. And what I would offer is that we believe that all children have equal potential, right? They have every gift within them. They can be great, they can be wonderful, but unfortunately, the obstacles in front of them that are not their fault, right? It is not their fault, the zip code that they were born in or the race that they were born into, and that should not predetermine how their potential pans out, right? Every child can be successful, and so we think about this idea of like potential is limitless, but right now opportunity is not. And so we believe that if we recruit leaders, right, we develop, and we place them in schools to have a transformational experience academically for children, that it will start to shift the systems that be to show that we can really fix this thing that all kids deserve the exact same education, right? And we believe that this first 2 years that you do with us is really just the first 2 years of your journey. We believe that what then happens is you're building up just a battalion of leaders, right? Who are thinking about how is it that we're going to bring educational equity about within the classroom, also outside of the classroom. And so we've got alumni of our program. There are 1,800 alumni strong in New Jersey specifically, and many of them stay in the classroom. They're now veteran teachers, 15, 20, 25 years in. Some become principals, superintendents. Others take the route of getting elected to their school boards to try to bring about policy change that way. Others are working in the DOE. And so we really think that it's going to take a group of like-minded folks, right, who believe that equity is possible, to really shift the system. And in New Jersey, locally, we have about 100 first and second year teachers that are placed in Newark, Patterson, and Camden, who are doing work across 40 schools, with our alumni, with veteran teachers who are not part of Teach for America, and really trying to move the needle.
All right. So you're putting your folks, teachers, into you listed 3 districts among the most troubled, most vulnerable districts in the state. That's really what you're talking about, is trying to get good people into those districts. Is that right?
Right. And also taking these folks, these leaders who are hungry, who are ready, right? Who are thinking about what does it mean to build community, and placing them in communities where, one, we do have a presence already with our alumni, but
Okay.
also having them work with folks from the community locally, right? And so we really focus with them on like what does it mean to partner with the veteran teacher down the hallway? What does it mean to partner with the community-based organization that supports your school? We believe strongly in relationship building. We believe that like Teach for America is not the panacea, right? We know at this point, I think we know that the way systems issues come about is it's not going to take one thing. It's not like a one issue problem. And so we know that we're not the panacea, but our goal is to really think about like what are our gifts, what are our talents, and how do we integrate into the community? How do we work and lock arms with the community to bring about change?
Okay. Well, what I hear you saying is that really the community is the key. I mean, even in a city sort of as large as Newark, for example, you still are working in what I imagine you want to be relatively tight knit communities that are brought together in large part by the school that's in that community.
Absolutely, right? We think about like what is the ecosystem that surrounds our kids, right? And so you talked about Newark in particular, that is the largest school system, right,
Right.
in New Jersey. And so it's important that we're not in a vacuum, right? And so we do work with the city council, for example. We do a backpack event, our second annual backpack event where we give backpacks and supplies to the community. We're also working with the mayor in his 10-point literacy program. We work with the first African American owned bookstore in Newark, right? Because we know that literacy is so critical and so important. And so it is really thinking about how do we know who's in the community, who are the
Mm.
players, who are the power players, and how do they know us, right? And where do we find that synergy? And so yeah, community is at its base level how we're going to move forward.
Okay. Now, in any, you mentioned power players in the community. In many communities, the power player maybe is a local business person, someone who owns or runs a business. How has been the response of the business community in some of the places where you're working? Are you happy with what the way businesses have stepped up? I
Absolutely.
mean,
And I
that'll
think
lead
it's
into
like,
the next question, what I really want to talk about. But I want to hear a little bit about this, about how businesses react to the kinds of work that you're doing.
absolutely. And I think I know the next question, so I won't give it all right now. But, this idea of businesses are so much the heart of the community, right? Particularly
Right.
local businesses. You find people who've been established for 30, 40, 50 years, right? They're the heartbeat. And so like when I think about source of knowledge, right? And I think about Patrice and Masani, who are doing amazing work, as like the local bookstore, it is the epicenter of Newark in so many ways. We do like a silent book reading where we just kind of like pull out folding chairs and get in the street and we all just read, right? Our new teachers, our staff, community members. We think about what does it mean to frequent local businesses in the area, right? We think about, just putting, like bringing ourselves, like our full selves. How do we live? How do we work? How do we play, right? In the communities where we're also
Right.
serving. And I think that's really important to just show like how interconnected we really are.
Okay, that's interesting. And then the larger question, the overarching question, why businesses should be interested in what you're
Yeah.
doing and the work you're doing. We hear over and over again. I hear it all the time whenever I ask people about business people about why they work in New Jersey, why they located in New Jersey, why they stay in New Jersey. Among the first answers they give is the quality of the education system.
Yeah.
So the question I always have for people like you, folks who are actually in the system, is that view justified? Does New Jersey have the kind of system that would justify that view, that makes it an advantage, that makes it a selling point for,
Yeah.
Choose New Jersey and the governor and whoever else to go out and try to get people to come here? Does the educational system live up to the reputation that that government leaders and business leaders would like to project?
And I think it's super nuanced, right? I always look at the ratings, and we always kind of toggle between Massachusetts and Connecticut, between being
Right.
like in the top three for education. And I think that is true for some kids in New Jersey. That is very true.
Okay.
We have over 600 districts in our very
Right.
small state, which is really
Mhm.
interesting to begin with. And so, yeah, that is part of the reality for some kids. But unfortunately, when we dig a little bit deeper, we're seeing that it's actually much more nuanced, right? It is not, unfortunately, in the top three for all kids. And then also I think that we have to put this on the national scale of what does it mean
Okay.
to be top three. And so we
Right.
look at our NAEP scores, and NAEP is basically, it's the report card for the nation, right? It's the way that we can compare children in New Jersey to children in Alabama to Hawaii, etc. And 40% of third graders, just a year or two ago, scored proficient. 42% of third graders were proficient third grade readers. And so the question I ask is that enough? Even for kids who education seems to be working for, is it enough that not even half of our third graders in the entire state are proficient third grade readers? And that gets us to be in the top three for education, right?
Okay.
And I think I would juxtapose it as well with like, what I know is also the conversation of like, this is a great state. Between our parks, yes, some of the education systems, the infrastructure, the diversity, this is what makes it great. And I think that we also have to look like to what's coming. And so I saw a McKinsey report that I thought was really interesting that really tied to business, right? And it was talking about how New Jersey is poised to create 130,000 jobs over the next
Mhm.
decade. And that's going to be in like administrative services, management services, business, insurance, finance, science, transportation. I mean, all of these different places. And
Right.
what's interesting is like not only are we growing, but we're actually growing these sectors and we're outpacing the rest of the nation.
Mhm.
But what is also true, and I've heard a lot of businesses talk about this, is that they're starting to feel a widening talent shortage. And so the question becomes, how do we look at education to not only just get kids to high school and be done, but like this is like we are literally creating the workforce of tomorrow. And so I think it's a critical time. And I think we have a lot of the right conditions to kind of all get together and stop and be like, how do we actually all attend to what's happening to children who are just entering at 5 years old and really looking at like what is their trajectory to get to high school, so that when they're ready to go to college, when they're ready to enter the workforce, are they ready to take the jobs that people will retire from, and also take the jobs that we will be creating at a huge pace over the next 10 years.
Right. Well, at least we hope so, because the economic growth depends on that. So
It is true, right?
that's an interesting point. So I'm curious then, what do you consider the biggest challenges that you and your organization face? I mean, you mentioned the 600 school districts, and a lot of folks, a lot of experts, there's been a lot of debate over whether that's too many. Is the system too fragmented? But
Hmm.
I don't want to put words in your mouth. I'm interested in hearing from you what you think your organization. Where do you think you need to focus your energies?
Absolutely. So this is something that we've done a lot of thinking about, and we were like, well, how do we approach this really macro problem?
Right.
And so part of the endeavor was actually like, we just got to get close to community, right? I'm going to keep saying this idea of community, and so we started interviewing. I mean, we interviewed almost over 800 people over a few years. It was students, principals, school leaders, parents, elected officials. We were looking at surveys that we had done, that other folks had done, and what we were realizing was. There was something around third grade reading, and I want to come back to this piece around like there was
Right.
something about reading that like if we actually don't
Mhm.
attend to getting our youngest learners, our 8 and 9 year olds, to a place of being whole, they are actually already on a trajectory to not making it. And so we know that research has shown that there is a strong correlation between third grade reading and high school success. And actually, like if you were a proficient or above proficient third grade reader, it's actually a really strong leading indicator for high school graduation and
Okay.
and college graduation, right?
Mhm.
And so we are really focused right now. Is like not only are we going to make sure that we're continuing to bring teachers into the field, because there's also a teaching shortage. And so if we're trying to build the workforce of tomorrow, yet we don't have educators, it's something we need to think about. And so and layering that onto this idea of like what are the factors that we really believe we can focus in on for third grade reading. And so while we're attending to the teaching shortage, we're also thinking about how do we strengthen educator development around how we're training our teachers to be stronger readers? How are we shoring up our data systems around early childhood and kindergarten and first grade and second grade so we're not surprised when we get to third grade? How are we making sure that we're bringing in more teachers into the fold? And how are we thinking about like how is it that we think about the curriculum that we've been using? And so we're working and locking arms with a lot of other organizations that are doing this work. We were just part of Jersey Can's Legacy of Literacy Coalition, led by Paula White, which did some amazing work with Senator Ruiz, who's really been a clarion caller, quite frankly, around what it means to attend to how are our kids doing. And so she was able to draft legislation that just passed, it was just signed by Governor Murphy, that really for the first time put a stake in the ground around literacy. And so you talk about the 600 plus districts. And so, yeah, that meant that 600 plus districts were kind of attacking literacy their own way. And we're not saying that everything needs to be uniform, but we need to put in some guardrails. We need to put in some parameters. And so now what we know is that the legislation will make sure that there is strong professional development for teachers around literacy, that we're thinking about having every school have a early literacy screener, right? And that's going to be a game changer. And so we know that what happens in Newark will be the same that happens like just a few miles down the road in Montclair, for example.
Okay. Yeah, I'm going to get to that in a minute, but I just want to point out for viewers that, and there'll be a link to this, what I'm going to mention. I spoke to Paula White a few months ago, I guess, about some of these very same issues. And for viewers who are interested in that, it's also a really good discussion. You should check that out. There'll be a link to to that video in the post accompanying this one. But I want to get back to then the issue that you're talking about in third grade readers. Where should the leadership come from? I mean, it's your organization certainly, but where do you look for? Is it really the local communities, the local school boards? What role does the state have to play? Where do you see those actors fitting into the kinds of things that you're talking about?
Yeah, and I think I don't want to speak for so many folks, but what I've seen, right? And when I think about what I've seen
Yes,
work,
from
it
your experience and your organization's perspective, your perspective as someone who's working in this field.
what I've seen work is that it is a marriage almost of like grass tops and grassroots, right? And I think what is also clear is that we're kind of like, oh, I don't want to step on toes. This person should do it. But actually, like we all have our strengths and we all can move at different speeds in the work that we do. And so I think what it's going to be is like, what is the clarity of what your organization or what your entity can do really well, right? And so we think about our elected officials. And so they did the work. They did the work of talking to legislators. They did the work of talking to the community. Like we can pass these bills. We can do this work. And then I would say like Is it appropriate, right, for them to be in the schools? Probably not. But there are folks, right, who know, who understand, who develop teachers, like this is their craft. And so it's like, how are we talking to each other? How are we building those relationships to be like, okay, this is what's happening. This is what we're hearing. So now let me now take this. Let me take this and be like, okay, this is what that will look like, right?
Okay.
I work and I supervise principals. I can work with my principals. I know how to invest. It's then principals, right, who are really great at thinking about how do I take something that I'm hearing and how do I operationalize it in my classroom, right? It is the CBO who's coming in, right, who does professional development for teachers. It's like, I hear you're doing this thing. We do this really well. And so I think that there is opportunity for synergy, but what I will say is at the nexus and the crux of this is that we have to be talking. We have to be getting into conversation. We have to not be afraid of difficult conversations. We have to not be afraid of what the past and the legacy and people before us may have left, but say we can actually show a model. And I think New Jersey is prime. New Jersey is actually, for me at least, when I've done research, been a state where we actually, I think, have shown what it means to not be of the same political parties, not be of the same communities, but find a way to come together to move something. And I think literacy can be that, right? I think that you're seeing, when you see the mayor saying one thing in Newark, and then you hear the head of Newark Public Library saying something else, and then you hear the executive director of Reading Partners who's coming in to bring a tutoring program saying the same thing. It is showing that folks are talking and they're invested in the same outcome. And just because the steps to get there are not exactly the same does not mean that we can't really lean into, okay, what am I hearing? How can we move? How can you move? And how can we find that middle ground to move forward, not for ourselves, not for our own gratification, but because really kids are on the line here.
Okay. All right. I don't want to turn you into a lobbyist, but I do want to see if there are any policy changes that would help make that process easier for you. I mean, are there things that either state, local, or county governments could or should be doing that would facilitate the kind of work? Because listening to you, that statistic about 42% of proficient reading at third grade level is really, I think that's going to be frightening to a lot of people, I think, who've never heard it before. Are there policy changes that you think are would help your work?
I mean, I think right now the policy changes that we're seeing, there's been a lot of movement around like teacher certification, right? Getting more people into field. There's been a lot of policy movement already about their reading. I would say, especially for your viewers, right? When I think
Right.
about what I would leave them with at this point is that like, I think it's the people on the ground at this point that are going to make this movement, right? And so
Okay.
what I would offer is like get plugged in, understand what's coming through the legislature, but then I imagine too, like kind of like ask your own child's school, what are you doing? What does this look like? What will this mean for us? How will we need to like what role will the PTA play? What role will the school board play? Because I think that's actually where we see the unit of change happen is
Okay.
when like as a community we can get our arms around it. I also think like, if I know that you speak to a lot of folks in business. And so again,
Yeah.
I kind of go back to what I said a few minutes ago. I think we're at a tipping point now where businesses can play a larger role in education, right? They can think about like how are we actually looking to the workforce that's coming? Where can we make investments? Where can we, lend power either in people or capital or whatever that looks like? But I think we're at a place now where, it's that fine line of like how do we operate? But at its core, Teach for America started, not in the political space, and we started just really as just a scrappy group of folks, right, who 35 years ago wanted to see some change, and I think that was a blueprint from what we've seen, and that is just the story of our country, right? It is a group of scrappy people who believe that better is to come and find a way to make that happen. It is literally the blueprint that we see over and over, and that's what makes our country great, right? That's what makes America America.
Okay. And for business owners or executives watching now who want to get involved, best thing for them to do is to get involved in the local community, the local school, either where they live or where their business is located. That
Absolutely.
should be the path for them.
I think so, absolutely. I do some research on, who are the education organizations doing work right now, right? Is Teach for America a part? Is Reading Partners, active? What is the educational arm of like what is Jersey Can doing and what does that look like in my community? So I think it's a landscape analysis, right? To your point of like where it's also where I live, but also where I conduct business. Who
Right.
are the players? who are the folks that I should try to get plugged into. It really is the first place to start. And I think Teach from, if folks want to learn more about Teach for America, they can go to teachforamerica.org, of course, /New Jersey, if they want to learn specifically about the work that we're doing here and want to get
Okay,
connected.
we'll have those links available too for anyone who wants to see. Finally, before I let you go, given all of this, given what you're saying, and I hear the dedication, the passion in your voice, though, I'm curious though, what you think of the future. Are you optimistic? Is that reputation that we talked about at the outset for having a good education system, is that in danger? Are these problems that deep? Again, I go back to that literacy statistic. What do you think? Does New Jersey have what it takes to get to where to either maintain where we are, at least where we are now, which is, as you say, third in the nation, although that's maybe damning with faint praise given all the other things you've talked about. What do you think of the future? How do you view where we're going?
Yeah. Um, I am optimistic, right? I think
Okay.
this idea of like you got to confront the brutal facts, but we have like I'm seeing change, right? Like even just in these last 6 months, this legislation, this we're planting a flag around literacy. That's a huge indicator, right? We're seeing some schools in some of our districts, they reported double digits increase in reading proficiency. So
Okay.
it is happening in small ways. We're just needing to get connected. We're needing for folks to talk to like, how did you do it? How do I do it? I believe strongly that New Jersey can be the standard, and not just in a numerical way, not just first, second, or third, but there's a lot of great things like when your mayor, who is dealing with so many different things, like, nope, we're going to have a specific 10-point literacy plan, and we're seeing a lot of that happening in many different cities across New Jersey. It is showing that folks are ready. Folks are looking to put aside whatever issues we may have had. But I believe strongly that we can be a standard for the nation on what it means, to turn the ship, and that it wasn't a miracle. It wasn't like something that there was magic or somebody behind a cloak, if you will, but that like we're gonna show like here are the best practices, and change isn't linear. Change doesn't happen overnight. We just have to stay the course. But we can do this, and we will do it.
Okay. Well, that's a good place to leave it on that kind of optimistic note. So that if people do want to get involved, they don't throw up their hands and say there's nothing I can do.
Absolutely.
They'll look at your organization and schools and in their communities and hopefully get involved. So we will leave it there. Tahina Perez, Executive Director of Teach for America New Jersey. Thank you very much for joining me. I really appreciate you taking the time. This is a critical issue for New Jersey and the business community and the state in general. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Jeff.
And thank you for watching. Until next time, stay safe, everyone.